Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. Keeping with this podcast theme of how presidents are managing change in college athletics, I'm thrilled to be joined by a president who is facing change head on. Dr. Polly Peterson is the president at the University of Jamestown in Jamestown, North Dakota. She has been a part of the university for 30 years, or no, 34 years, I stand corrected, starting as a controller in the business office, then as a faculty member in the Department of Business, Accounting, and Economics, as both a vice president and an executive vice president, and she became president in 2018. The University of Jamestown announced earlier this past year they were leaving the NAIA and joining the NCAA as a member of Division II, a major shift in peer group association, travel, championship opportunities, and of course, money. Polly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Karen. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we have a lot to learn from you and your institution because before we started recording, you shared some very interesting things that I don't think presidents are thinking about. But let's start off the top with the transition from NAIA to Division II. You're in year one of an accelerated 2-year process of going from NAIA, which is a completely different organization, to NCAA Division II. Talk about that. How did that happen? How did we get here?
Well, first of all, thank you. I will say we're in year 2. In July, we learned that we were advanced
Okay.
to year 2.
Very good. Very good.
So we're hopefully in this last and final year of meeting all of the obligations that it takes to be an NCAA school. And I would say that this doesn't just happen overnight. I didn't wake up one morning and say, wouldn't it be a neat idea if we went to Division II? It was a lot of things. One of the things that UJ is well known for on our campus is landscape assessment. And so for me and our team, our administrative team, and what we ask of others is to consistently look out into the population, to the areas that we operate in, whether that's competitively or as a peer or aspirant group, and really understand the change that's happening in higher education to us and with us. And that included athletics. We had to keep our eye on what was happening with athletics, from a national perspective and a regional perspective. And as you probably found out in your research, we had experienced an area, geographical footprint, that had made the decision to leave NAI and go NCAA. That was over a period of about 15 years. And we were included from time to time in that discussion. And we felt at the time that some of those schools were going, those were rival schools, in fact, that were going to move to NCAA. The timing wasn't right for our university. And so we continued to look at what it would take for it to be right for our university. And we can talk about that with a separate question if you'd like, but we had to start thinking about what it would be to be ready to be NCAA. And we made a lot of strategic decisions. I'm a planner. I've been a planner as executive vice president. I was a planner. And we had to start making decisions that would improve our university comprehensively. Looking at NCAA at that time was part of that landscape assessment.
So what factors did you start with? I mean, obviously the landscape around you changed because people were leaving. But did you say, oh, well, I mean, there are some presidents who might say, well, do we have to have athletics? Is this something that we need to do? Talk about why that was important to your school.
Well, as a smaller university in North Dakota, we play other public universities, but there had been, as I mentioned, a lot of change, a lot of moving parts in schools that had left, 1 or 2 schools that actually closed in our region. And so for a small period of time of about 5 years, we looked at what is the best option for us, even at the NAIA level. And we made the decision to change conferences and move to the GPAC, which is a very strong NAIA conference. They look a lot like us from the perspective of mission. Those were faith-based schools who had very well-rounded athletic programs. And as you mentioned earlier, prior to the start of this podcast, we have a fair number of athletic opportunities for students. It is part of our mission. And so we were looking for conferences that had a similar robust offering of athletics. And we moved to the GPAC because that met some of those sort of comprehensive needs that we had. And so from there, we began a period of significant travel and a lot of missed class time. And when we made that decision, one of our evaluatives was, well, how much class time are our students going to be out of Jamestown? And it turned out to be more significant than we thought.
Huh.
And so for me, as I do, annual listening sessions to our faculty, staff, and students, it just became obvious that they were out of the classroom more than what would we could tolerate. Again, because of landscape assessment, we knew what the moving parts were. We knew that there were some NCAA, NSIC schools in our footprint that may be considering moving out of the Division II or out of the NSIC. And so at that point, we began conversations with the NSIC. What would it take? What would it need to look like? Do we look like the schools that are in the NCAA Division II? And we began by hiring a consultant who walked us through that very thoroughly. And it turns out that we looked a lot more like NCAA Division II than we probably even look like as an NAIA school. And largely because we were also in a pretty significant and aggressive strategic plan that added programs like doctoral programs, master's level programs, engineering programs at the undergrad level. Our enrollment had been growing, our endowment had been growing. Athletics staffing had changed dramatically over the years. How we traveled had changed dramatically. Had purchased 2 coach buses, several, we call them people movers, but large mini buses, I guess is a maybe better way to say that. We had improved facilities significantly, invested significantly in facilities over the years. And so we really did find ourselves in a position of strength when we were looking at the possibility of joining or rejoining our peers who had moved from NAIA into NCAA. And that
Gotcha.
became very attractive to us at that time.
Gotcha. So help my audience understand dynamics in NAIA. If I understand it correctly, you can still be Division One in certain sports, Division Two in certain sports, and Division Three in certain sports. But when you move to the NCAA, you've got to be all one division. How did that factor into this?
For us, we were not in a situation where our teams were diversified in what division they were participating at NAIA. After the decision to bring Division 1 and 2 together at the NAIA level, which was done about 5 years ago, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was in the same division. And so for that reason, it became less complicated for us. The only sport that we have that is considered club, in fact, was ACHA hockey. Our
Okay.
men's and women's hockey teams both participate at the Division I ACHA level and at the Division II ACHA level. We have one team in each of those 2 club leagues. They will remain as ACHA club teams. In fact, the NSIC has several schools that have club ACHA hockey, and so we will remain that. So it'll be a non-NCAA sport, but still very competitive with its own national tournament. And the NCAA allows for that. Everybody else in our programs will be moving to the NCAA Division II.
Okay.
Perhaps more of what we considered when you're looking at Division II is that NCAA Division II allows for both athletic and academic scholarship.
Okay.
So for us, that's what we were able to do in the NAIA model. And we needed to make sure that we could continue to do that because our athletes have the ability to both earn athletic scholarship and academic scholarship.
Okay. Okay. So you're moving into a conference. What's your sport portfolio look like compared to the other schools in the NSIC, which is the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference, right? How do you match them sport wise?
We had every sport they offered at the conference level except for women's tennis. So we have added women's tennis. This year is the first year that our women's tennis team is competing, and they're competing as an NSIC competitor. We do have men's soccer and men's volleyball, which are not sponsored by the NSIC. So they're going to do some extensive traveling. We have found a home for men's volleyball, and we are working on a relationship with St. Cloud State, whereby we will have a conference in possibly have the ability to compete in their conference.
Okay.
Most of those games, though, will be treated as home games at St. Cloud if that works out. So those two will have some extensive travel. But as you can probably expect, they had extensive travel
Yeah.
as an NAIA
Yeah.
university. So, and we really love the opportunity to recruit students into those sports because they're teams that bring diversification to our university, both from a geographical standpoint and from the standpoint that a lot of those students come from international opportunity, and that provides a lot of opportunities for our current students. So we don't we want to keep those two sports. We intend to keep those two sports available to those student athletes. Constant question I get is, what are you going to do about those two sports?
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
we
Sure.
get women's wrestling as well, but they do have the opportunity to continue to compete. The NSIC does not have it as a conference, but we do have the opportunity to compete at the national level, and that's as an NCAA sport. So it is those two that we get the most questions about.
Yeah. Makes sense. One of the things that struck me is that about 62% of your campus population is men, which in this day and age is quite unusual. And would you like you to talk a little bit about that?
Right. So, yeah, you're right. It is unusual as I visit with my peers around the country. A lot of times, private schools are having the opposite phenomenon. There's 70% women, 30% male. For us, I think it speaks to two things. Number one is the collection of athletic opportunities that we have. We do have more opportunities for women to compete than men. However, we have two or three athletic opportunities that have large rosters. Football tends to have a large roster, and the coach that we have at the present time is a fantastic recruiter who really loves the opportunity to have large teams who can compete both at the JV level and the varsity level. That'll be a little harder to do at the NCAA level, and so we have a concept we call roster management, which will probably bring that number down, and you'll see that shift a little bit in our numbers. And the other one is baseball. Baseball is similar. He tends to carry a little bit larger roster, and he enjoys having student athletes who compete as JV in the first year or two as they're preparing for their varsity experience. So that may change a little as well because NAIA does have a lot more competition at the JV level than the NCAA does.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's one of the bigger differences between NAIA and NCAA. Doesn't mean they can, it just means there's fewer opportunities.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But that contributes a little bit to, the reason that we're 60/40. Yeah, so and it as you know, football is a bigger sport, so it is harder to find a female sport
Yes.
that
Yes.
does offer that type of a roster size.
What was your learning curve as a president coming into all this? I mean, you had to go find a consultant. As you said in the interview, which I'm going to share with the listeners shortly, the announcement last summer, you and your AD spent a lot of time in the car together, visiting different campuses. Talk to me about the process for that.
We sure did. We called it the 4,000-mile tour. And we spent a fair amount of that summer reaching out to presidents and athletic directors and having the opportunity to meet them face to face. We felt that was important. Again, the university is that type of school. We really believe in interaction, face to face communication, relationship building. And for them to really understand who we were as a university, we had to make those connections personally. And our athletic director and I are friends. I know that sounds strange. We often talk about that, your own leadership style. We just have a great relationship. I have a great relationship with our coaches, with our athletic director, and all of my administrative team. And I think that's what creates an amazing culture here. And so we didn't think much of it. We got in the car together. We spent 4,000 miles together, a lot of overnights and eating in small town restaurants. And I think it did create this passion and conviction for what we really knew was the right decision for UJ by the time we were done. We met an incredibly great group of presidents and ADs that I get to talk to quite frequently now. Some of them walked us through the transition because they had been through it. They were willing to reach out and help us. They gave us some strong pointers in what to avoid as we're moving in this direction. Perhaps one of the bigger transition changes is compliance. NAIA has very little requirement for especially documentable compliance. And that was a place where we got a lot of assistance from college presidents, athletic directors, FARs, faculty advisory reps, et cetera, that this is the best way to transition. And so we took that advice seriously. We're really grateful now because we've built friendships along the way. And obviously they voted in our favor. So we count that as a summer of building relationships and friendships.
I'm going to let the listeners listen in on that press conference from a year and a half ago right now and just get a sense of what Polly's talking about.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. Today is a really, really, really exciting day. We've been waiting for this for a year. A year ago, Austin and I were making a tour. We called it the 3,000-mile tour around the Midwest, pleading our case for why we felt the University of Jamestown was ready for the NCAA. And we were really grateful to the NSIC, to Aaron Lind and the presidents who invited us into their conference shortly thereafter. That process, as you know, meant that the next step was to apply to the NCAA. And with a lot of work and a lot of gratitude that I have for Austin and the coaches and everybody else that was involved, our administrative team, our trustees, who really truly believed in this process and believed that we were ready. And we had done the work for years to get ready for the NCAA. We are so proud and excited to announce today that the NCAA has invited us into Division II. But not only that, they've invited us into the 2-year expedited process. That is a big deal for our coaches. It is a big deal for our students and our incoming recruits. This is a really great day, and this is a definite moment of pride for our university. It speaks to the quality of our coaching staff, the quality of our faculty and the academic programs here, the quality of our facilities, and all of the people, like I said, our trustees and our administration, who have invested heavily in providing our student athletes with a quality experience. We couldn't have done that without anyone. As many of you know, we've had an aggressive strategic plan, and that plan has included adding graduate programs, PhD programs, facilities, transportation opportunities, all of the things that you all know have made UJ a really, really special place. I thank you for all of that. Part of that strategic plan included a move to the NCAA, and today is the culmination of that initiative, and I am so grateful to all of you who have participated. This is an incredible day. Congratulations again to those of you who helped, who have been a part of this, who have wanted this for a long time. Way to go. Thank you to Austin. He and I have become pretty significant buddies over the last year, as we say, team bonding. We have a strategic plan that is Together We Rise.
Do you feel like you were like sort of like the Midwestern, let's go meet our neighbors kind of thing, visiting these different schools?
We sure did. We sure did. And it's, sort of one of those realities that we all have, where a lot of people know you and you don't know them. And we felt a little like that. We knew you. We had done a lot of research. We knew a lot about those schools. We knew a fair amount about the number of athletic opportunities they provided, who their people were, what their win-loss records were. I mean, we had done our homework, so we knew a lot about them. And so going and talking to their presidents and their athletic directors, I'm sure they thought, why do you know all this about us? But in turn, we needed to tell them as much about us and what that we were doing, why we were doing this, how it fit into a bigger picture, because it wasn't just for us about athletics. We really did believe strongly that NCAA itself fit into the strategic growth initiatives of our university.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, we were growing from a school that offered undergraduate degrees to a school that was offering 3 doctoral programs and 6 master's degrees and undergraduate programs in engineering, both mechanical and civil. We had grown from being just in Jamestown to being in Fargo and Phoenix, Arizona. And a lot of people didn't know that about us. Our endowment, the size of our endowment had grown substantially in the period of time that they may or may not have been aware of us from previous encounters. And so we had to get back on the road and meet, as you said, and meet our neighbors and help them ask us the questions that they might have had that would that would maybe cast doubt on whether or not we were the right fit for them. And in turn, we did answer those questions, and in a way that helped them understand that we were not just a school of 1,000 students. We were a school much greater than that when you counted all of the students that were here. And one of the things I said to them that I think caught them off guard a little bit was, when you see our enrollment numbers, those are full-time students. We don't have dual credit, which is very common right now. We don't have a lot of one credit students who come here, say, for example, for continuing education and then are counted in your enrollment count. These were students that are here and living here. So as I mentioned to you earlier, we're at 1,510 students, and almost all of them are full-time. I think I said to somebody earlier, I think we have 49 part-time students or something like that. We're just a real anomaly when you think about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
So they didn't necessarily realize that. If we counted all of the one credit continuing ed things that we're doing, or the non-credit bearing, we'd probably be over 2,000 by now. So
Gotcha.
we learned that people count differently. And so as we started counting the way they count, last year, for example, school ending 2025, we served 1,625 learners. This year, we'll serve over 1,800 learners. And so it is a different way of counting because we start so many times a year now than just the fall.
That's pretty remarkable. Remind the audience where Jamestown, North Dakota is, and then people more appreciation for what you just said.
Well, some people will say, we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're not. They say when you think about our state, most people will think about the capital, which is Bismarck, and then, the state's biggest city, Fargo. We're smack dab in the middle of that interstate. If you were to shoot an arrow right to the center of the state, that's us. That's Jamestown. So we have access in just about every direction to, an interstate that gets to Jamestown, which for many smaller schools, sometimes you get there by trains, planes, and snowmobiles. And here, you at least can get here on interstates.
It's not untrue, by the way. Having lived in Minnesota, so many of the people who come to Penn to study in the exec doc program, and I'm going to brag on it a little bit, become presidents at schools just like yours. And I really want my students to understand what that means in terms of bringing the community together, the faculty, the alumni, your local town, city, council, those other things, in addition to all the work that you did making new friends.
Yes,
Let's talk about that a little bit.
absolutely. That is incredibly important work. From the standpoint of alumni, I think it's two things. It's a cling to the past, a cling to what we know, a preciousness about our rivalries that they remember. And then there is this other side of our university is growing, and the better and stronger our university is, the better and stronger my degree is. We all want to be a part of something that's growing and in a way that is not diminishing our quality, but committing to our quality. And then not growing for the sake of growth, but growing for the sake of purpose. And that's what we had to communicate, was that things have changed. There are things that have changed beyond our control. One of the realities that our alumni remembered was the good old days of the DAC 10. And that was a great conference made up with some schools that left for the NCAA. And so if they hadn't been watching, that was a reality that we had to make sure they understood. This isn't the DAC. Since the days of the DAC, when a couple of schools closed and 4 schools moved on, the DAC wasn't anything we could recommit to. It didn't exist. And so we had been at the GPAC, we had been part of the North Star, and it was a very different landscape. And so really being available to listen, to being available to answer the questions that our alumni had, that this community had. Because we are a school that's very prideful and very committed to quality. And we had to be able to say, we were patient in making this decision. As I shared with you earlier, we were years of patience, making sure our facilities were ready, our coaching staff was ready, that we weren't sharing coaches with two sports. In the old days, that's what coaches did. They were a head coach in one and an assistant in another. We had to make sure that we were committed to making our coaches the heads of their programs and had the resources they need, had the scholarship dollars they needed, had the facilities they needed. We were patient about that. We also needed to make sure we had a school that was financially strong enough to do this long term and be successful. I write about winning matters. I speak often about winning matters. And I believe strongly that winning is more than just an outcome. Winning is a significant commitment to input, to the making sure you're doing it right from the beginning, that you have put the resources, time, talent, and treasure together in such a way that winning becomes an outcome. And if you can do that systematically over time, winning will come. And to a person, that's what our coaching staff wanted to know is, are we going to do that? Are we going to commit to putting the resources necessary into this process that they would be able to win? And, I think they felt strongly that I have been there for them all the way through this process. I kept them involved. We were transparent from the very beginning. We often can say, UJ, sometimes we tease ourselves and say we're the best kept secret in the Midwest. But at this point in time, when I was letting the coaches in on, quote, this secret, right? Because in the beginning, you're just studying it. You certainly don't want to go out with a message that is preliminary and you decide you're not going to go. We had to count on our coaching staff to keep this quiet. And they did. And I cannot be more grateful to them that they did, because we wanted to do this the right way, very thoughtful, deliberately assessing our resources, assessing the possibility of going into this successfully. Our strategic plan says we will enter the NCAA and the NSIC successfully. And, we had to make sure that we could do that. If we couldn't do that, then we shouldn't do that. So I really respect and appreciate how respectful and appreciative they've been towards the process. And I think together we did this.
That's quite remarkable because in this day and age of social media and coaches wanting to announce the move or get ahead of the curve, that's really quite remarkable that you got that kind of buy-in from everyone.
From
Not just
everyone, and it's a big staff, right? It's a
yeah,
big staff.
yeah.
Yes.
That's very impressive. Before we wrap it up, I do want to talk about some of the larger focuses of your institution because, again, your uniqueness is what attracted me to this conversation. You're a Christian-based institution. You're in the upper Midwest, which traditionally has, or recently has talked about an enrollment cliff. And the cost of higher education is always a topic. So you're doing this in the midst of all of that. How does it fit? How does it work?
Well, it only works when you look at it from the comprehensive nature of our strategic plan. That's the only way this works. When we built this plan and we did our listening sessions, and again, landscape assessment, I've been planning for decades. We looked out and knew the demographic cliff was coming years and years ago. It wasn't a secret. 2008, there was a significant drop in birth rate. We've known that forever. We can sit back and hope that it doesn't happen to us, or we could plan. And so we began planning. We began realizing we can no longer be this residential campus in Jamestown, North Dakota, and expect the definition of insanity. Let's just do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. That was not going to happen. Anybody who thought so is crazy. And so way even, back, if you go back many years, you can look at us making changes. Our first initiative in the strategic plan was to diversify our enrollment. And that meant age, gender, race, geography, all of the ways that we had to think about what it's going to take to continue to be relevant in the next century. And that meant we had to serve the adult population. We had to serve the online population. We had to think about graduate programs because we knew that students more and more are stepping from the bachelor's degree right into master's degrees. So we had to have the right master's degrees. We had to have the right geographic footprint. If we're going to add some of those graduate programs that are pretty, that require significant faculty in high paying fields where clinicals are an expectation, that might not happen in Jamestown. So we had to build those programs out where there was access to clinicals, where there was a robust housing community, where those faculty would want to live. And so that was the start of moving to Fargo with our physical therapy program, and now 2 nursing programs there. It was the start of moving to Arizona to build some healthcare programs and some research programs there that were highly in demand. It involves listening to those communities. What do you need that fit within our mission that we can do to serve this community and not duplicate resources that already exist there? And so we've done that with some precision, to be honest. I think that's why when people say, gosh, how are you growing at a time when others are losing? It's because of strategic visioning that we knew this was coming so long ago. And we planned for, again, diversification of all of those things I just described. And then it's getting out there and fundraising. Because as you said just a minute ago, higher ed is also getting so much price pressure. At the undergraduate level, for a private university, UJ is a very affordable educational experience. Our students here on average pay between $18,000 and $20,000 for tuition, fees, room, and board. All of that. I always tease and say that's about $1,500 a month.
Amazing.
When you think about it, you can't pay rent for that
Yeah.
anymore. And you can do that here at the University of Jamestown. Eat here, live here, and get a very high quality education. That means though that we have to do things very affordably. And we have to have an incredibly supportive alumni base and community who will support it with gifts. And that's what we've done. Many of the things that we've described today, new facilities, new programs, new geographical footprint, are able to happen because we also, as I talked about the 4,000-mile tour, I've done the 40,000-mile tour across the country, asking and inviting our alumni and others to participate in this story. And they've done that in droves. They've answered affirmatively, and we've raised well over $150 million in the last 14 years or so, 15 years. That is the reason we've been able to do this without encumbering ourselves to the point of unaffordability. And I think, they're the heroes in this story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great when alumni step up. It really is. It's so important. Polly, I can't thank you enough for sharing your personal journey, your philosophies, your hard work and strategic planning. I love that because at Penn, we talk about strategic planning all the time. And I hope my audience appreciates how much thoughtfulness went into what you're trying to do at Jamestown. So thank you for spending some time with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you. You have this beautiful smile, so you make it very easy to have the conversations and to really be transparent and open about it. So thank you for being you and doing what you do. I believe so strongly in higher education for the future of our country and for the future of our students that will be entering a really complex employment future. And I appreciate what you're doing in allowing us the chance to share what we do so that we can tell the opposite story that the world is telling. So thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you, Polly.
Take care. God bless.